Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Michael Sandler, your host on Inspire Nation. If you've ever wanted more brilliance on demand, then do we have the Radical Brilliance Show for you. Today I'll be talking with Arjuna Ardagh, awakening coach, public speaker, the best-selling author of at least 9 books, including the #1 national bestseller, The Translucent Revolution, and the author of a brilliant book on awakening your mind, Radical Brilliance. And that's just what I want to talk with him about today, about the brain and brilliance, how and why original life-changing ideas come about, and how we can have them ourselves. That, plus we'll talk about Hare Krishna monks, Shakespeare for 1-year-olds, self-help and kitty cats, the Eiffel Tower and Beethoven's Ninth, Jameson's Whiskey, Dionysus Baklava and Coca-Cola, Camelli and Resting, Angel the Cat, Disney and the Ride Police, and what on earth flirting with Kettering has to do with anything. So welcome to the show, Arjuna. Are you ready? Gotcha. Are you ready to shine?
And no, I've got bad news. I'm not ready to shine. But the good news is that I have learned over time how to put myself aside, make myself thoroughly irrelevant so brilliance can shine in my place.
Woohoo! All right, well put. So before we do that, if we talk about brilliance being in your place, what did you get for your first birthday?
Well, okay. Well, when other kids were getting stuffed squeaky toys, my parents gave me the complete works of William Shakespeare and the Oxford Book of English Verse. I came from a very intellectually overachieving family.
And I've got to ask, at what age were you actually able to dive into that?
Oh, I don't know, probably 13, something like that. 10, 12, I don't know. Yeah, I grew up in a family that was very over intellectual. They were, Oxford and Cambridge people.
Very good. I had a professor when I was going to college, finishing up college in France, who said that if the word wasn't in the Oxford English Dictionary, you would automatically get an F.
Sounds like good advice.
He said American is not a language. But with that said, what does the word acuity have to do with anything?
Boy, it's like a quiz on the book. Yeah, well, I was just saying, I was giving an example of boy, you've caught me a little off guard. I can't quite remember how I phrased that, so I'll have to read it back to you. But you're a good interviewer. This is like a test. Did I really write the book? Okay, yeah. So I think what I said was a person's worth in my family. A person's worth was not measured by their capacity to love or their financial stability, but by their intellectual and creative acuity, ... In fact, by knowing what the word acuity means in the first place, because, of course, acuity is the kind of word you only know what it means if you have thoroughly dived into the backwaters of the English language.
So going from the nuances of acuity, what did your mom tell you after you discovered a Hare Krishna monk?
Okay, should I tell you the whole story?
Please.
Yeah, well, so what I'm explaining in the book is that I was born into a very troubled family, an intellectually kind of superior family, but a very troubled family. There was a lot of suicide in my immediate family. I was a small family. I think I only had a handful of actual living relatives, and 6 of them killed themselves. 3 of them killed themselves. 3 out of 6 or 8 close relatives. So suicide was like the kind of that was the family pastime in my family, killing yourself. So so when I was about 14, that's about the age when you start to differentiate, and when you're very young, your family is just the way things are, and beyond the boundaries of your family is the rest of the world. It's kind of out of focus. You live in the cocoon of your family, so whatever happens in your family, you just think is normal. But when I got to be 14, I went to boarding school. I started to compare what was going on in my family with other families, and I realized, oh my God, I've been dealt a hand of 2s and 3s, the 2s and 3s of clubs, and I realized that the deck was stacked against me. So I played a little bit with psychotherapy to see, but I realized that whatever medicine I needed was going to need to be much stronger than psychotherapy. So I started to explore spirituality. So one day I went to the King's School in Canterbury, which is sheltered underneath the shadow of Canterbury Cathedral. So I was walking beside the cathedral one day, dressed up in my, very formal wing collar, black tie, black suit, boater hat. And I see this Hare Krishna monk sitting there, dressed in orange robes, shaved head, beads. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. So I waited. I thought this guy must be from India, so I waited. And when he'd finished chanting, I went up and I said very gingerly, I said, "Excuse me, sir." I said, "Do you speak any English?" He said, "Yeah, mate, come on, sit down here. Come on, sit down here. I'll tell you all about Hare Krishna, enlightenment, reincarnation. I'll tell you all about everything." He was a Cockney from the East End of London. So he explained to me all about all this stuff. I thought, wow, this is great. This makes sense. You're not going to fix yourself through therapy. You're actually going to obliterate yourself into the divine light of Krishna. Fantastic. So I invited him back for a cup of tea to my study that I shared with other boys. Everyone thought I was crazy bringing this monk for tea. In fact, he only wanted warm milk with honey. But so that evening, I thought, great, now I know what the rest of my life's going to be. I'm going to become a Hare Krishna monk. So I went to the red phone box. You've probably seen these red phone boxes they have in London. And I phoned my mother and I said, "Hey, mummy, good news. I've met this Hare Krishna monk. I'm going to become a Hare Krishna." And of course, my mother did my mother did when she was stressed or upset or when things didn't go her way. She threatened to commit suicide. So if you become a Hare Krishna, I'm going to commit suicide. So we had to forge a quick compromise that I wouldn't become a Hare Krishna monk. Instead, I would learn transcendental meditation, which was a little more acceptable. The Beatles had done transcendental meditation, and by that point, a bunch of other people too. So I learned TM in 1971, and a few years later, I became a teacher of TM while still in my teens.
So beautiful. And from there, it sounds like for a while you went down the spiritual rabbit hole and maybe even came out the other side of using it to attract wealth into your life.
Thank you for saying it that way, but I wouldn't quite say it that way. No, for many years, I did make spirituality a primary focus, which means the pursuit of enlightenment. So, I went deeply into transcendental meditation. When I got to be 23, there was an aspect of transcendental meditation at that time, maybe it still is, that was to do with siddhis, supernatural powers. Yep. And one of them was to do with flying. Now, at that time, I don't know how it is now, we didn't actually fly, we kind of hopped. We would get together in these rooms full of foam mattresses, and we would do this, we would say this kind of little mantra, and the body would kind of, so the body would become, something would happen, the body would kind of jump, who knows what was really going on. But so anyway, I got to the point where I was 23. I could theoretically levitate, although it wasn't really levitating, it was sort of jumping. But I was terrified of girls. I was really terrified of girls. If I met a girl I really liked, I would just become weak at the knees. So I thought something's wrong with this situation. I'm 23. I can levitate, but I can't keep up a conversation with a girl. So I actually dropped out of transcendental meditation, and within a few weeks I signed up with Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who was the king of free sex.
Wow.
It was like, no, that was there was recently a TV series on Netflix called Wild Wild Country, which was about Rajneesh's movement, and I was part of that for 10 years. I lived with him in India, I lived with him in Oregon, where the series was filmed, and I lived with him again in India afterwards. And there was, that was all about lots of sex, but it was also about the pursuit of enlightenment. So I stayed in that for a long time, but during that time, it wasn't so much that spirituality led me to the pursuit of wealth. That wouldn't be quite right. It was that after being with him in Oregon, I had by this point spent, I suppose, 15, 16 years of my life primarily focused on spirituality. And now I'd freed up all that sexual energy as well, but I didn't really know how to make money. So it wasn't so much that I used spirituality to attract wealth, but I did shift the attention to getting things together in the world. So I was able to buy a house. I started a school in Seattle that was very successful, training. It was training psychotherapists to integrate hypnotherapy into their work. I was quite proficient in hypnotherapy, so I was able to make quite a lot of money, a few $100,000 anyway, within a few years. So that was just another phase of the pursuit of wealth and material success, which was just another, there were several things that I pursued prior to understanding of brilliance. One was spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
One was psychotherapy, like seeing the shadow and working through that. One was material wealth. One was creativity, and one was social and political action. So these were, in other words, making the world a better place through demonstrating and like that. So these were different things that I pursued in my life in the pursuit of real fulfillment, in the pursuit of real, deep, lasting fulfillment. I was interested to know, what does it take for a life of real, deep fulfillment?
Well, and that's a perfect segue here of really diving into your book. Is there a magic switch for deep fulfillment?
Well, okay. Can I give you a little bit expanded answer on that, because it's a very interesting question?
Sure.
Okay. So, it's interesting to think about. We are Homo sapiens. We are a type of Homo. Homo is a kind of monkey. It's a monkey who has less hair, basically. But before us, there was Homo erectus, there was Neanderthal. There were a bunch of different varieties of Homo. It appears, from what we understand, that we killed them all off. We Homo sapiens were a fairly aggressive little monkey. We killed the other Homo strains, and we became the dominant species. We've also done a lot of mean things to other mammals as well. So what is it that differentiates Homo sapiens from other mammals? Is we have this highly developed prefrontal cortex. So we also have the middle brain, which is more associated with emotions, and we have the reptilian brain, which is connected to the brainstem. So we have the same brain that reptiles have. We have the same brain that other mammals have, but we also have this highly developed prefrontal cortex. It seems dolphins have something similar, elephants do too, but a lot of mammals don't. So what this means is, for us anyway, the prefrontal cortex, a lot of people think it's kind of to do with meditation and spirituality. It's actually the opposite is true. In fact, when you're in meditative states, there is reduced blood flow to the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex is responsible for cognitive thinking, for being able to think logically. And what it means, it gives you two abilities at the same time. One ability that the prefrontal cortex gives you, or increased size and blood flow to the prefrontal cortex, it gives you the ability to evaluate your present life circumstances. How well is my life going relative to other people? To evaluate, how well am I doing? Now, as far as we know, we don't have any proof that other mammals can do that, can compare the quality of their life with something better. But we can do this. We can evaluate the present circumstances, compare it to something else, and the gap between the two is personal evolution. The gap between the two is the self-help industry, you see. Because we can say, okay, I'm making this much money, I could be making this much money. The gap, but the tension between those two spurns the get rich quick, the kind of affluence, abundance, wealth, law of attraction. The gap between these two says, I've got this kind of relationship, I want to have this kind of relationship. The gap between these two generates interest in books like this, Men Are From Mars, Women From Venus, or a host of other relationship books. The gap between the two, I've got this kind of health, I want this kind of health, spurns the multi-billion-dollar health industry. And the gap between these two also generates interest in spirituality, because I'm like this, I've got these kind of thoughts, I've got this kind of but I could have what Swami Ji, Friji, Bubuji, Beyond Ananda has sitting on his throne. I could be like that. And we fantasize what that's like. And that the gap between the two also creates spiritual seeking. So this dynamic tension between awareness of what I have and awareness of what I could have creates all kinds of seeking. However, we need to be able to evaluate, what is it that really works? Does it really work to try and get more money? And by now, there's absolutely conclusive proof from many, many sociological studies that quality of life does not increase with increased income past a very limited point. If you're earning 20 or 30,000 a year, you increase it to 40 or 50, yes, the quality of your life goes up. That stays true to about 100,000, 75 to 100,000. After that, it makes no difference at all to the actual how happy you feel. And there's a certain point where it goes down again. In other words, on average, very wealthy people have less happiness than average wealthy people. You can read this research at the Center for Positive Psychology, Martin Seligman's work at Penn State University. So, and we can compare all of these ideas, like the pursuit of relationship generally doesn't actually result in greater happiness. In fact, the seeking for your soulmate actually it doesn't really seem to work with that as the primary focus. We could go through also the pursuit of health, doesn't actually seem to be a good thing to put at the center of your life. So now we can do a little reverse engineering. If we look at highly fulfilled people, all of these books were written by my friends. Actually, I keep the top shelf on both sides. You can't see it on this side. So I was able to interview a lot of highly fulfilled people. Like this guy here, John Gray. He's one of my best friends. I actually wrote a book with him together called Conscious Men.
Yeah.
So John Gray, he is wealthy, but he's also a highly, highly, highly fulfilled person. I know him well. He lives in a state of kind of bliss most of the time, like super normal well-being. I know a lot of people like that. And so I've been able to interview 420 people and ask them. I've been able to interview 420 people who are just bursting with well-being, with enthusiasm, with joy, with gratitude, with energy, and to find out what is the magic switch, what is the magic ingredient which makes life amazing. And it's not actually, now this is a very important question. If we knew what makes life incredible, it would save us a lot of dead ends. And what we find out, it's not money. It's definitely not money. It's not the pursuit of health, if that's central. It's not relationship with your soulmate. It's not actually the pursuit of enlightenment. Although the qualities of enlightenment may be a good way to describe fulfillment, making your life about being a spiritual seeker turns out mostly to be another dead end. So what is it actually that highly fulfilled people have in common? And you could get the answer to that question from my 8-week course for a one-time price of $399. I'm just joking. Okay, that was a little.
I saw it coming.
That was a joke. Okay, so no, actually, what we discover is highly fulfilled people. What they have in common is a life of meaningful purpose and service. They are devoted to making a difference to other people, and in a way, the bigger that vision is, okay, the larger number of people you feel you're serving, either people that are alive today or future generations, the greater your sense of fulfillment is. Let me read you some of the answers. When I asked this question, what is the central element? When I asked this question of people who are highly fulfilled, I didn't look for people with any other quality except that they're bubbling with well-being. These are some of the answers that I got. Having a sense of mission, being on fire, living your passion, knowing what I'm here to do and doing it every day, living authentically, surrendering to something bigger than myself, feeling taken over by a creative force which I can either resist and create suffering or flow with, feeling so excited by what I have to offer that I stop thinking about myself, feeling taken over by something greater than self-preoccupation. So those are actually the qualities of highly fulfilled people, is a feeling of serving something bigger than me. In fact, in the words of Lynn Twist, who wrote the book, The Soul of Money, I think it might be hidden behind here, but she wrote the book, The Soul of Money, and she's also founded the Pachamama Alliance, which has saved by now millions of acres in the Amazon rainforest and put it into permanent land trust. She said to me, I guess I still have personal desires, but I can't really remember what they are, and I don't pay any attention to them. All of my life, from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed, is about giving and contribution. She said, but there's an irony. When you give up thinking about yourself, when you give up trying to get stuff for me, ironically, that's when you actually discover true fulfillment. Ironically, that's when you actually find out what a life of real purpose and meaning and joy and ecstasy is. It's when you stop thinking about how to be happy and actually think about serving other people.
Woohoo! So how would you define brilliance, and where does that fit in?
I would define brilliance as allowing a luminosity to shine. It's very similar to how I defined translucence. I don't know how many, 13, 14 years ago, I wrote this book. Which
Translucent
was
Revolution.
that was the #1 bestseller back in 2015, back in 2005, not a long time ago. But very similar, that something is shining through you, which is not coming from you, but through you. A luminosity, a light is luminously shining through you. It's like bursting out from through you, and it comes from an intelligence beyond your own mind.
So, no pun intended, but brilliant. So then what can you tell us then about, well, let's use an example here. So we have the, University of Southern California, the Laboratory for Neuroimaging. What can you tell us about what they discovered with thoughts, and contrast that to something like an Eiffel Tower or Beethoven's Ninth coming about?
Great. Okay. So gosh, I can't remember the name that you just said now. You want to read it again? Because I don't have that page of the book open.
So
the Laboratory for Neuroimaging is at the University of Southern California. It's hard to keep that phrase in your head. They postulate, of course, it's really a postulate. They postulate that we have 48 thoughts a minute. I mean, it's really hard. How do you know that? It's just a guess, that we have 48 events in consciousness a minute. And they also postulate that we have that 24 hours a day. In other words, there's something like that going on even in deep sleep. It's hard to prove. But if we accept that figure, which is somewhat arbitrary, but it doesn't really matter, that means that we're having about 2,880 thoughts per hour, or 70,000 thoughts a day. You're having 70,000 events in consciousness per day, right? Now, because there's maybe it's 8 now, but I did this on the basis of 7 billion people on the planet. I guess we have to upgrade this. That means that every day there are 483,000 billion thoughts being generated every day. And now if we take that per year, that's 176,000 trillion thoughts a day. That's an unimaginably large number. 176,000 trillion thoughts every day, every year. So the question comes, okay, so how many of those thoughts, how many of those 176,000 trillion events in consciousness that happen on this planet every year, how many move the game forward for everybody? How many result in upgraded technology which gives us better shared information? How many can reduce global warming, can find better ways to fight wildfires? How many of those cure disease? How many of those thoughts break down conflict and create harmony? How many of those thoughts upgrade and move the game forward for all of us? Well, when I ask people, a hopelessly optimistic figure would be 1 in a million. But even that is ridiculously optimistic. It's not. If it was 1 in a million, that would still leave, that would actually leave millions that would leave billions of thoughts left over that are brilliant. Well, maybe there are billions of thoughts left over that are brilliant, and most of them just get squashed on their way up. But the number that actually percolate to the surface and become something spoken that's new, become something that affects all of us, is minuscule. And the way we can understand this is actually by recognizing that there are 2 different kinds of thought. Now, I'm not going to try and share screens at this point because I'm not familiar with the technology we're using, but you can think of it, here's a page in the book, so you can think of it, the top image shows what we could call horizontal thoughts. That's one thought causes another. You get one thought, boom, it bumps into another thought, causes another thought, etc. So an example of this would be, if you're on Facebook, you're scrolling through your timeline, and sometimes you get to, a really old, wrinkled hand holding a little baby's hand. You go, oh, so nice. Little old hand holding a little hand. You go, oh, how nice. Heart, 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 share, beautiful. So you're passing it on. You didn't make that up. You're passing it on. You're sharing it, right? Then you get to like a sunset, and there's a couple holding hands in the sunset, and somebody's made a little heart like this. Go, oh, heart, sunset, share, heart, 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 like, pass it on, right? And then you get to another one, and it's got another nice image, and it says, before you complain about anything in your life, remember your blessings and be grateful. Okay, it's a little affirmation. Before you complain about anything in your life, remember your blessings and be grateful. You go, oh, nice, heart, 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 share, beautiful. You remember it, right? So that evening, your partner comes home from working. You say, hey, how are you? Oh, I had a terrible day. I had just an awful day, I mean, I got stuck in traffic on the way to work. There was like an accident. I was an hour late. I walked into the middle of the meeting. Everybody glared at me. My boss said in front of all my co-workers, where's the report? Well, it turned out that in the traffic, I tried to drink my breakfast. I spilled juice all over the report. I couldn't hand it in. Everybody was like looking at me horrible. I got a terrible headache and backache during the afternoon. I just felt like awful. And on the way home, I got a flat tire. It was just like the worst day ever. And then you remember this little affirmation that you saw on Facebook, and now you're going to regurgitate it. So you remember it and you say, well, honey, before you complain about anything in your life, remember your blessings and be grateful. And unfortunately, it doesn't have the same uplifting effect that it had on you earlier in the day. You get a slap, okay? Because it's completely inappropriate, because what's happening is you're just regurgitating. You're just repeating something. It's not an authentic, fresh response to the moment. It's a regurgitation. And a lot of the thoughts we have and a lot of the things we say are like that. Most religion becomes just endless repetition. I mean, literally, the catechism in various religions, just repeating word for word something written in a book. There's nothing original or fresh happening. It's just repeating, 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 repeating. And a good example of this is, the Sermon on the Mount, So, there's this line in the Sermon on the Mount, behold the lily, I'm going to paraphrase, behold the lilies in the field, they do not toil, they don't worry, and how beautiful they are. I'm just saying that from memory. I don't remember it word for word. So you can imagine when Jesus actually said that. If we go back to 30 AD, they're all sitting around the Lake Sinai or something, and they're kind of, they're all hanging out together. And then he's saying, "Blessed are the meek," and they go, "Oh yeah, great. Blessed are the meek, and blessed are the pure of heart." And then it gets to this thing about, "Behold the lilies of the valley." You can imagine when like, wow, awesome. It would be like a live Beatles concert or something, like, wow. Wow, 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 completely fresh. But when you've heard that again and again and again and again and again, that phrase must have been repeated, I don't know, millions and millions and millions, hundreds of millions of times since it was first printed in the King James Bible in 1603. By the time it's been repeated and repeated and repeated, although it was originally a totally brilliant thought, it kind of loses its freshness over time, you see. So we want to be able to contrast between original fresh thoughts, which bubble up out of emptiness, which are kind of inspired. The word inspired, it literally comes from in spirit. It means infused with spirit. So there are thoughts that bubble up from silence, from stillness. They bubble up inside of you, and they become speech that has never been spoken before. They become actions that have never been taken before. They become innovation and solution that has never been thought of before, versus thoughts that are just obediently repeating what you've heard. So that contrast. Now, today we witness a kind of an alarming overwhelming number of unsolved problems. There's terrorism, there's global warming. For the Democrats, there's the agenda of the Republicans. For the Republicans, there's the non-cooperation of the Democrats. Everybody's got some reason why this is a terrible time. We've got wildfires in California. Everywhere we look, there's an unsolved problem which looks like our end. But actually, what the world is really missing more than anything is original, out-of-the-box, disruptive thinking that can allow us to look at things in new ways and find solutions. That's how everything has been solved up to now. Every seemingly unsolved problem we've had in our history as a species was finally solved by somebody thinking about things in a new way. And that's what, in my opinion, that's what the world needs more than anything, is new, innovative, out-of-the-box thinking.
So now, thank you for that. Let's go and let's begin with the chart behind you. Let's talk about the brilliance cycle and how we can cultivate this or get into the flow so that brilliance can chase us down.
Beautiful. Lovely how you said that. That's great. Brilliance can chase us down instead of us chasing brilliance down. That's awesome. I love that. Excellent. Wonderful. So, yeah, so I kind of, this book really came to me. I didn't write it. I took a message, just like if you're in somebody's house and the phone rings and your friend is out, so you're alone in somebody else's house, the phone rings. Oh, is John there? No, sorry, John's gone out shopping. Could you take a message? Sure. What's the message? So you find a pad of paper next to the phone and you get your pen, you say, what's the message? And then you write it down obediently. And you check back, did I get that straight? Yeah. And then John comes home, oh, there's a message. The John comes home and he sees this writing and he reads it and he goes, da, 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 and he says, calls out and he says, wow, Michael, you are an incredible poet. You are just, I can't believe this is pure poetry. And you want to say, no. It's not me. I just took a message, you see. So in the same way, this book came to me in a time of, I'd actually had a car accident. So I was kind of laid up, So in a time of kind of incapacitation, this book was able to seep through the cracks between the thoughts, see. This book was able to seep through. There's that thing from Leonard Cohen, where he says, ring the bells that still can ring. Forget your perfect offering. There's a crack in everything. That's how the light gets in. So this book came to me at a time when there was enough cracks between the thoughts of my busyness that light could get in. So really, during that time, I started to inquire, so what is it actually that allows people to lead this kind of brilliant life? And we can think of a parallel in health. We think about physical health. What causes health? Well, you could say, okay, health is the result of, regular good elimination. You go to the bathroom every day, have a good dump, and you don't accumulate toxins. If you don't go to the bathroom for a few days, you have to go to the doctor, because it's really unhealthy to not eliminate. But that's not the only thing about health. You also need to eat healthy food. So if you think about it, good health is putting good food in this end, taking out toxins the other end. If you keep that kind of channel going, you're good. But it's not just about one or just about the other. So that's two opposite things that go together to make up health. Equally, you could say good health is about sleeping. You need to get enough sleep. But if you spent 20 hours a day in bed, you wouldn't be healthy. You need to balance it with exercise, with movement, with raising the energy, raising the metabolic rate. So this combination of activity and rest creates health. So we could see lots of other things. It's polarities that create health. In the same way, it's polarities that create brilliance. It's not one thing. So here we have a chart for the brilliance cycle. And I'm going to go through 4 stations, but it's a bit misleading because these are not really stations that you stop at. They're just kind of things you see out of the window of the train as you're passing through. Actually, you're always passing through. If you stop somewhere, that's a kind of blockage, you see. So up here, one of the stations you pass through, we could call awakening. An awakening.
And can we use that as a time period? So for those who are just listening, as kind of looking at the face of a clock.
Yes, okay, 12, 3, 6, and 9, exactly. So up at the top, we could say is awakening. An awakening is moments of transcendence, moments when you go beyond the limits of your mind. Now, unfortunately, the spiritual subculture has tried to claim a monopoly on moments of awakening, which is highly inaccurate. I've discovered that actually people who, this came as a surprise to me because I've come from that background myself, but people who ascribe to spiritual philosophies and ideologies actually have no higher occurrence of these kind of moments of transcendence than people in completely different. In fact, the community that has the highest occurrence of these kind of moments of transcendence is people who are recovering from addiction. Okay, so like the 12-step, Alcoholics Anonymous and stuff, that's the community which has the highest rate of people having moments of transcendence. But you can find moments of transcendence among people who practice extreme sports. For example, my buddy Steve Kotler, so he wrote Stealing Fire. His book is all about the result of moments of transcendence. He said, I've never meditated or had a spiritual activity in my life. It's all come from extreme sports like skiing, skiing off cliffs and bungee jumping. So it's important to understand that these kind of moments of transcendence are not necessarily tethered to a spiritual ideology. You can have it from great sex, you can have it from psychedelic drugs. There's lots of ways to have moments of transcendence. But a moment of transcendence means where you step out of your mind completely, you're out of control, and you have a sense of infinity, right? You have the experience of boundaryless consciousness, where there's no sense of me anymore. Now, if you can hover here, if you're able to hover without holding on to it, if you hold on to it, you become a spirituality addict and you just want to meditate all the time or go to India, right? If you can hang out here without holding on to it, but also without pushing it forward, if you push it forward too much, you become an addict to manifesting and making things happen, like the law of attraction. But if you can actually just hang out here without needing to stay there or move too far forward, you start to become aware of a kind of subtle tremoring. In Kashmiri Shaivism, they call this spanda. It's a shimmering. You discover that pure consciousness is not just flat, it's shimmering with energy. And if you can actually learn to hover with this shimmering and to let it increase, it eventually will increase in its amplitude and become music or become great writing, and becomes a new innovation, new technology. It becomes an expression of evolution. So this is the movement from 12 to 3, which is from shimmering to full-on creative flow at what we could call 3 o'clock. So here, the flavor of this station is full creative expression. It doesn't smell of spirituality anymore. It smells of art and innovation and high energy and collaboration. Like, wow, let's do all these things together. This is the area of art, of entrepreneurship, of innovation, of disruptive business models that disrupt what's come before. So now if we hover in the station of creativity, one particular kind of creative impulse, there are many kinds of creative impulse, one particular flavor of creative impulse we can call intention. Intention is a type of creative thought, but it's a creative thought now which is not just creating art in this moment, it's actually creating an image of a potential future. That's called intention. Intention is, I'm going to create this thing over a period of time. And that's the next movement, from intention to achievement. And this whole movement is about getting things done in the material world. So by the time we get around to 6 o'clock, we've got the opposite values of 12. 12 is about boundarylessness. 6 o'clock is all about boundaries. Boundaries of budget, boundaries of time, boundaries of agreement, boundaries of schedule, boundaries of contract. Everything is about constraint at 6 o'clock. The constraint of operating within limits. It's inherently a little bit stressful because you're having to squeeze yourself into channeling flow down pathways where you can create a result. So this path here for a man or for the masculine energy is predominantly dominated by testosterone, like pushing through boundaries to get to a result. For women, it's a little more characterized by estrogen and oxytocin, which is more about collaboration. Come on, we can do it together. We're sisters. We can trust in the outcome. So there's more of a kind of like us, we can do it together. Yay, I've got your back, you've got mine. The masculine tends to go it alone more. But either way, once you get close to 6 o'clock, we start to see the brain chemical noradrenaline kicking in. Mm-hmm. And so by the time we get down to here, we're actually up against deadlines. We're pushing through. We see a suppression of the parasympathetic nervous system, a dominance of the sympathetic nervous system, and we're pushing through to meet boundaries. Now, once again, there's another movement which begins in the full blossoming of achievement. In the full blossoming of achievement, there is one element which generates the next phase of the cycle, and that's what Gregory Bateson called the double bind. Yeah. The double bind recognizes that down here, you are responsible. Up here, there's nobody there. Mm-hmm. Down here, there's you. You are here. You've signed your name to a contract and you are responsible. Yes, you are a person and you're responsible and you have to make choices and you have to be accountable for the result of those choices. Now, when we make choices, we get to something called the double bind, which means if you go in this direction, You didn't go in that direction, and there's going to be some element of regret. If you switch on TV or Netflix or Amazon and watch any kind of repeating drama like ER or Nashville or any of those TV shows that are not comedic but are kind of drama, every episode is dominated by some kind of double bind, having to choose between this and this. In whichever you choose, you're going to feel regret. And Gregory Bateson said that is the nature of human evolution. We evolve through a series of double binds. So I could give you lots of examples. We can loop back if you want, but suffice to say for now that whatever choice you make, there is going to be some element of regret. So when you get a little past 6 o'clock, you start to you have feelings of regret, shame, remorse, guilt, and inadequacy. Now, those feelings have been given a bad rap because they were shoved down our throats by Protestantism, by Catholicism, by Judaism. A lot of religions thrived on keeping you in those feelings all the time. You are guilty, you're a sinner, you're like permanently guilty. We kind of went, in the counterculture revolution of the late 60s, you went, enough of that. I don't want to hear any more about guilt and sin and shame for a while. So we kind of rejected the whole thing. But actually, it is through feeling those feelings temporarily, just briefly feeling regret, shame, remorse, guilt, failure, that you actually learn. You can't learn unless you feel the fruit of your mistakes. So you have those feelings, you go into learning, which includes apology, which includes being able to understand what you did and taking full responsibility. And so now you move through this cycle, which is the movement from regret to humility. When you come around here, you realize, okay, I'm just a little human being. I'm just a monkey. I do the best I can. I'm essentially a good person. I do the best I can, but I have limited resources. There's a lot of things I don't understand. I have limitations of the body. Like my ideas actually change. I'm internally conflicted. I'm doing the best I can, but I've got a lot of handicaps. That's a place of humility, of like, I'm ready to learn. And recently we've seen examples of political leadership devoid of humility. Political leadership devoid of humility becomes very charismatic, but because it can't learn from its mistakes, it ends up actually becoming very problematic and creates a lot of divisiveness. So humility, the last movement, is from humility to awakening, because in humility, you realize, okay, I am incredibly unequipped to deal with the challenges that I'm faced with. I can't do this on my own. I need the help of something bigger than myself. So that means you start to have an intuition. The seed here is an intuition of something bigger than my own mind. So if you turn that intuition inwardly, it becomes meditation, and you go through layers and layers and layers of thought and reactive feeling until you discover what we call true nature, which means you discover that who you really are is infinite consciousness. If you turn that curiosity about something bigger than my own mind outwardly, it becomes, you look at the beauty of the world, you see how a little seed becomes a tree, you look at the patterns on the wings of a butterfly, you look how a beehive works, you look at all these mysteries, magical mysteries, you go, wow, none of that was created by the human mind. So what created that? And it gives us an intuition of the divine, of God. And so that becomes devotion and surrender. But either way, whether it's through an inward connection with your true nature or an outward connection with the divine, you come back into awakening, you merge with that source again in moments, and the whole cycle begins again. That's the brilliance cycle.
So thank you. Brilliant cycle. I want to take each one of these things, 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock, and real quickly go through. There are people listening to the show. Each of us are often stuck at one point or another, or even loop back between one or two. So maybe you can walk us through, if we're stuck at 12 o'clock, if we're stuck at 3 o'clock, how do we keep things moving forward?
Sure. Okay. So, all right, good. So let's preface that by saying that everything I said so far about the brilliance cycle is actually purely theoretical. So, which makes it actually redundant. It's like, if you look at the atomic table, the periodic table, there are elements in the higher end of the periodic table which have been postulated to exist, but they don't exist in the material world. They are gases that are so unstable, you can't actually make them. You can just postulate that, well, if we pop in an extra electron, we've got this. even though it doesn't actually exist. So in the same way, this model is purely theoretical. I've never met anybody ever. I've interviewed the most brilliant people on the planet that I could find. I've never met anybody living freely in this. Everybody has blockage. So let's briefly identify, before I answer your question directly, there are actually 4 kinds of blockage that we can identify, and they all exist in all 4 quadrants. The first is addiction. Addiction means that you get caught up in one part of the cycle and you think that is the meaning of life, right? Life is only about this or only about this, and everything else is redundant. The second kind of blockage is judgment, that you don't so much feel positively about one part of the cycle, you just feel really negatively about one part of the cycle. Oh, that's stupid. I can't believe people do that. It's like totally stupid. That's judgment. The third is called aspiration resistance, which is very common, which is you're somewhere in the cycle and you look a little ahead on the cycle and you go, wow, that looks amazing. You look at somebody further along a particular quadrant and you think, wow, how do you do that? That's incredible. How do you, it's like watching a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat. How did you do that? That's magic. So you aspire to that, but you never actually, you also have resistance to it. So we can describe aspiration resistance exists all the way around the cycle. And finally, there's looping, which is the unfortunate phenomenon that's so common in our world today of specialization. So, Leonardo da Vinci was a Renaissance man, and if we look historically, people tended to do everything. Like farmers, if we go back just a generation, farmers had pigs and geese and ducks and some corn. They had all different things. It was an eco culture. But now farmers tend to do mono farming, just one crop. And everybody does this. We specialize, which means we get really good at going round and round in a circle at a tiny little bit of the cycle, and we no longer become brilliant people. So those are 4 kinds of blockage: addiction, judgment, aspiration resistance, and looping. So your question was, what does addiction look like in these 4 areas? Is that right?
Well, it's what does, if we are, okay, let's go with addiction. Let's say that we're addicted to awakening at 12 o'clock. Where do we go with that?
So addiction to awakening would mean that you develop an ideology that the purpose of human life is enlightenment. Okay? So that would be the ideology. Well, I'm not enlightened, but the Buddha was enlightened. And Shri, 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 we, Shri, Shri, Swamiji, Jai, Shri, in Rishikesh is enlightened, in India, and so there's this enlightenment possible, but I'm not in it. So therefore, my whole life is about trying to become enlightened, and that becomes an end in itself. Like, forget everything else. I just need to stay tunnel visioned on becoming enlightened. And the problem with that, the problem with addiction to spirituality, is there is actually no final point of arrival. If we recognize that moments of awakening are about the recognition of infinity, well, there is no boundary to infinity. However deep your meditation goes, you always know it could go deeper. So you get addicted to that. Your whole life becomes about meditate, 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 go to India, do retreat. And then you kind of grudgingly suffer having to work and make money just so you can go back and repeat that again. So that would be addiction. That would be basically a spiritual ideology. Here at 3 o'clock, we have the addiction to creativity, make new stuff all the time, make new stuff. So this would be like an artist. If you go into an artist studio, generally they have lots and lots of half-completed canvases. You see, not much gets finished. Leonardo da Vinci was a good example historically of an addict at 3 o'clock. His career spanned, I think, 43 years. During that time, he actually completed 23 paintings. So that's like incredible. There's just incredible amount of incomplete stuff. And he actually apologized at the end of his life for having lived in so much incompletion, And so very, very creative people, they keep initiating things, they find it difficult to finish. So a novelist, a novelist is like 7 years into their novel, never managed to bring it to a completion. Because the thing is, when you create, you can always make it better. There is no logical end to the creative process. 6 o'clock is addiction to productivity. And that's like having the to-do list, which never runs out. You keep checking things off, but you keep adding things as well. So each day you check off 5 things, but you add 7 more. So there's this constant feeling of you just have to stay up later and later at night to try and get it all done. And there's also, because there's an identification with doing, there's a resistance to delegating or an unwillingness to trust other people because they're going to screw it up. So I have to do everything myself. An addiction to 9 o'clock would be an addiction to self-improvement. It means constantly going on seminars, going to therapy, just constant curiosity about how can I fix myself, and feeling I'm not ready to actually offer any help to anybody else because I need to fix myself more. So that would be the addiction to the massive self-improvement industry. So those are 4 ways that we can create an ideology which keeps us addicted to just one phase of the cycle.
So then, thank you. So then, if we're at 12 o'clock, if we're addicted at 12 o'clock, what are some tips to get unstuck?
Well, the tips would be to. So this actually leads us. First, let me just answer that in a broader way.
Sure.
There are 4 kinds of blockage, right? Addiction, judgment, aspiration, resistance, and looping. And all 4 exist in all 4 quadrants. So that means we have 16 unique flavors of blockage. And once we get proficient at this, we train coaches in this. Once we become proficient, you start to be able to recognize the precise flavor of each kind of blockage in each quadrant. 16 flavors of blockage. The way to get unblocked is through practice, is through conscious, deliberate practice. Now, I try to keep a really broad definition of what we mean by practice, okay? So practice could include, meditation, yoga, qigong, the usual culprits, but meditation could also include saying, I'm sorry. It could also include going on vacation. Practice could include taking the right supplement. Practice could include having sex regularly, but not because you feel horny, but because it's a deliberate practice. Going to the gym could be a practice. Keeping your agreements could be a practice. Not being late could be a practice. Anything which you do deliberately to upgrade your game a little bit is a practice. But the important thing to understand is that a practice that's really helpful, let's say here at 12:30, would be very detrimental down here at 6:30. A practice that would really help you at 2:45 would be the last thing in the world you want to do at 8:45. So a practice that helps you in one part of the cycle actually hinders you in the other, which is actually leads us into why most people are not the best candidate to choose their own practices. Because we tend to choose from our addiction. You see, like somebody who is addicted to spirituality will choose meditation as a practice. Somebody who's addicted to productivity at 6 o'clock will choose, getting things done. Let's go, let's go, let's go. I remember once going to see a spiritual teacher, and in the audience was a graduate of a Tony Robbins seminar. And the Tony Robbins graduate put up his hand and said, okay, I'm really interested in this kind of spirituality thing. Could you give me the quick version of how to get this licked in 30 days? How can I just take care of the enlightenment thing in 30 days? Tell me what to do and I'm going to do it. So that's like when a productivity addict hears about something outside of productivity, they just turn it into an item on a to-do list, you see? So we have 16 qualities of blockage. The practice is to deliberately bring disruptive habits that shake you free of your addiction. So you were asking, I think, somebody addicted to 12, what's a good practice? A good practice is to learn how to pay attention to the subtle vibration that happens in stillness, to learn to relax the judgment on thought. Like in other words, when you're meditating, to stop seeing thought as the enemy, but to become sensitive to a thought that is inspired. And then after sitting, when you open your eyes, to capture that in some way. You could capture it through writing, but if writing puts you too much into your head, you could capture it through dance or music or painting, and then transfer it into another medium. So the practice at 12 would be to realize that actually meditation is fine, but it's a prelude to inspired creativity that is inspired as a thought in the mind of something bigger than yourself.
Thank you. And then if you're addicted at 3 o'clock, if you're stuck in the flow.
Yeah. You start to make commitments, right? So you set intentions. When you're in the middle of creative flow, you set intentions bound to the future. You put time limits on them. you create an accountability partner who holds you accountable, and you break your intention down into tiny pieces, like 30 minutes or less. I'm going to get this done by this date, and you have somebody hold you accountable. Now you've entered into the practices from 3 to 6.
Beautiful. And then if you're stuck in productivity, if you're in the do mode.
Right. So if you're stuck in do, right? Stuck in do. That sounds like a pretty nasty. So if you're stuck in doggy do, the practice is to make resting an accountability item. You're addicted to accountability items, so you're used to getting things done. So you say, okay, taking an hour to sit in a chair staring at trees, that's one of my to-dos. Or going on vacation and unplugging from the internet for a weekend and relaxing and getting massages, that is now an accountability item. So you actually introduce non-doing as in your list of doing.
So, and it's interesting because that takes us also from 6 to 9 o'clock, as one of the big challenges of a doer is when the weekend hits or the vacation hits and you think you're going to feel great, all of a sudden you feel completely miserable.
Exactly. So that's actually, that's right. So this is because of what's called parasympathetic flooding. So when you're moving towards 6 o'clock to get something done, there's a dominance of the sympathetic nervous system. That's the nervous system that's sympathetic to your will. And there's a suppression of the parasympathetic nervous system. If you stay up late to meet a deadline, you ignore the fact that you need to go to the bathroom, you ignore the fact that you haven't eaten, you ignore all the needs of your body and your emotions to get things done. Well, when you finally stop, either because you stop or because you have a little burnout, as you move through 6 o'clock, you get what's called parasympathetic flooding, which means all of the messages from the body and the emotions that were suppressed flood back in. If you only suppress them for a day, the parasympathetic flooding is fairly easy to deal with. You just rest for a little bit. If you've suppressed them for a week, you're not going to feel so good. You're going to feel like super stressed. If you suppress them for months and have a breakdown, you're going to feel about as bad as anyone can possibly feel. Like having a real breakdown where you are so overtired that you can't rest anymore, that's about as deep a hell as anyone can go, is a breakdown. So that's all characterized by parasympathetic flooding, which is why when you commit to resting, if it's been a little while since you last rested, that's why you need to kind of prepare yourself for not feeling good for a little while.
That makes sense. Thank you. And then the last one, which is stuck or addicted in the letting go, 9 o'clock part of the cycle.
Well, that's actually addicted in working on yourself. Okay, it's addicted to one more seminar, one more kind of method. And people do that. I don't know if you've experienced this. People just move from one ideology to another. If you meet someone who's an addict at self-improvement, one week they're really into the Enneagram, the next week it's gene keys, the next week it's body work. They just keep changing the methodology. But it's all fueled by this itch of there's something wrong with me that I need to fix, you see? And so the way to move beyond that is to actually recognize, to relax and recognize. I often tell people, you are broken. You are fundamentally, irreparably broken. You are a train wreck. And there's no way you're ever going to fix yourself. You are the qualities of your individuality are basically an interference pattern with grace. So there is something fundamentally, deeply, irreparably wrong with you as a separate entity. And that's a little device, because somebody goes, well, if I can't fix myself, I'm just going to give up. And when you give up, then we can ask, but great things happen anyway, don't they? When you step out of the way, actually good things do happen. There is love. There is support, there is humor, so what is it makes all that happen when you actually give up trying to make things happen? And that's when we step into surrender to something bigger. That's where, so prayer could start as a kind of form of self-improvement, but it's a form of self-improvement that flips you from me to turning to something bigger than me. So prayer would be a good pivotal moment, or just beginner meditation, like Hinayana meditation, just meditation which anticipates a path, where you're going to say, okay, I'm just going to start sitting and just paying attention. That's actually seems like a form of self-improvement, but it's a form of self-improvement that now actually takes you beyond yourself.
Beautiful. So on that note, we could keep going and going. It's a brilliant book. Actually, let me ask first, where can people go to find Radical Brilliance and to find out more?
Well, the best thing is go to the website, radicalbrilliance.com, or just go to Amazon and you'll find it as a paperback, as a Kindle, as an Audible. I think that's about it. Yeah, those medium.
Fantastic. So if you didn't catch radicalbrilliance.com, come on over to inspirenationshow.com and we'd get you over to radicalbrilliance.com. A few last wrap-up things, then a very brief practice. First off, what one homework assignment would you give people today so that they can start on their path to brilliance?
Well, I think what has really made the most difference is to recognize your ideological bias. So I've presented today 4 stations, and to be able to recognize, do you have an ideological bias where you think that transcendence and enlightenment is better than anything else? Do you have an ideological bias where you think that creativity is what gives your life meaning? Do you have an ideological bias towards productivity and achievement? Or do you have an ideological bias towards self-improvement, towards always thinking there's something wrong with you? And so I think a good assignment would be to self-assess and see, have you put one of these stations as central? And if you actually recognize that and allow it to become part of the cycle, then there's more of the possibility of true brilliance shining through you.
Beautiful. Is there any advice you'd give parents for their kids today?
Leave them well alone,
I think that was a song.
Yeah. So Kurt Black's in his forward, he says it really well. We are all born brilliant. Hang on. The truth is, we are all born brilliant beings in touch with our essence and the stream of energy that flows through us. As children, we sing, we dance. The brilliance just moves through us unimpeded, free-flowing, with no conditions placed on it. We are not worrying, oh no, I can't sing like Bruno Mars or Michael Jackson or Adele. Later, when we start comparing ourselves to others, we get screwed up. We go into self-contraction, we become self-conscious. So it's actually, it's a wonderful thing to recognize you are naturally brilliant. What we just need to do is just let go of the artificial shoulds and shouldn'ts, and brilliance will shine. And practice is really just to antidote conditioning. It's not to make you brilliant. It's just to undo what interferes with brilliance.
Beautiful. Do you have a brief practice you wouldn't mind sharing with us?
Yeah, so let's just close our eyes.
Unless you're driving, and then do this later.
Yeah, okay, exactly, unless you're driving. So if you're driving, you can just you can do this with your eyes open. So just first of all, just notice your breath. And just notice how deep the breath goes. Is the breath just in the upper part? Does it actually move the diaphragm? Or does the breath actually cause a movement in the belly? Just take a moment to notice the shallowness or the depth of the breath and just let it be that how it is. And if in observing the breath, if it changes, then let it change. But just now you're going to notice the quality of the breath and any kind of contraction that's associated with the quality of the breath like it is right now. And now you can continue to be aware of the quality the breath has, and you can also notice anywhere in your body that draws your attention. And that's usually going to be a place of contraction or tension or discomfort. So just if you notice something like that, just let the attention softly rest there, almost like a little massage. Just allow the attention just to rest. And if that causes a little yawn, or if it causes a little movement, then let that be. But there's no need to do anything. Just notice where something in the body is calling for awareness or attention, and just flood that place with attention, just like you shine a light on it. And you just can continue now. So Just notice a place in your body which is asking to have attention paid to it. Flood it with attention, with light, with awareness, with but without any attempt to try and change it. Just okay, you need some attention. And if that place relaxes and the attention goes somewhere else, then just pay attention there. And if you notice a natural tendency to sway or move, then let that happen, but without any doing. It's more like just not interfering. And you can continue this if you are sitting with your eyes closed, and if you have a sleep mask handy, you can continue this for as long as you like. And if your eyes are open for any reason, you can just bring more mindfulness to the way that the breath and the body is, just noticing the quality of your interiority. Now we can take that deeper, and there is a guided invitation on my website. When you do the 5-day, there's a 5-day invitation to become more acquainted with Radical Brilliance. You can find out more about it, but for now, let's just let it rest like that. Good. So you can continue if you like. You could press pause if you want to continue, or if you feel that's good for now, then you can bring your attention back to Michael and Arjuna getting complete together.
Woohoo! Well, thank you so much, Arjuna. This has been brilliant, and this has been beautiful, and now at the end, peaceful as well.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Welcome. Yeah. Great. And I think, perhaps just in that vein, just to kind of keep the whole thing going, let's just remember peace is fine, but so is energy. Feeling good is fine, but feeling depressed is really appropriate sometimes too, to be able to learn from mistakes. So let's just see if we can develop a spirit of welcoming all different states and see them as equally welcome and equally useful to a life of brilliance. Peace can be overrated if we make that better than excitement. So let's see if we can find a way to welcome all of it.
So I'm going to jump from peace to excitement, or it might be from 12 o'clock to 6 o'clock here. So I'm going to jam the gears, crank it up for the finish, and then go for everyone out there. This is Michael Sandler saying, be well, have fun. Woohoo, yes! Get radical brilliance and begin diving into your brilliance today and shine bright. Woohoo! Thank you so much, Arjuna.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, be sure to like below. Also, leave your comments. Have some real fun with it. Subscribe to our channel where you're going to get more great videos, more interviews coming up. And check out our website, inspirenationshow.com. That's where you'll find tips, blogs, information, videos you won't find anywhere else, and useful and helpful resources to really help you kickstart your life and to shine bright. Thanks so much again. Thank you for your support. Like, comment, subscribe. See the website. Thanks so much and have fun. Of course, shine bright. Woohoo!